I'm going to call the meeting for October 21st, 2015, the Board of Selectmen to order. The first thing is the acceptance of the agenda, and I just want to make a note for anyone that's here. The ACC appeal that was scheduled for tonight for 4 North Street is going to be continued. On
North Road.
9 North Road, excuse me. Be continued until November 4th, so if anybody's here to speak on that, they don't have to stay through the meeting. If you want to, though, you can.
Bye.
There's plenty of other interesting subjects that you might be very fascinated in this evening. Next time.
All right. Announcements, Libby? What's that? Oh yeah, we're going to move the Gray Lady hearing up to right after our consent items. So that's the changes to the agenda. No objections, that'll be accepted, and we'll move on to announcemements.
This meeting is being audio and video recorded per open meeting law requirements that is supposed to be announced. It's we have do we have people from ASAP? Yeah. Linda, the Nantucket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention is requesting the board to proclaim Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through 30th, and there is a proclamation, and I think everybody got a ribbon.
Great. We appreciate you wearing your ribbons. The ASAP Week, which is held annually, begins on Friday night at the football game and continues to the following Friday. And the flyer here gives you an outline of all the events that are taking place, all school levels as well as the community at large.
Okay, and I'll read the proclamation just so everyone has it. Whereas alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse in the United States prevents millions of people from reaching their full potential in school, in the workplace, and in their communities. And whereas the 2015 annual observance of Red Ribbon Week provides Nantucketers the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to healthy lifestyles and to celebrate the safe, healthy choices that most young people and adults make every day on Nantucket by wearing and displaying red ribbons and sharing the information. And so, now therefore, be it resolved that the Nantucket Board of Selectmen do hereby proclaim October 23rd through October 30th, 2015 as Nantucket Red Ribbon Week, and encourage all citizens, businesses, and private agencies, media, religious, and educational institutions to support and promote activities that raise awareness and encourage prevention of underage substance abuse and adult substance abuse. As well, we call on the Nantucket residents and visitors to wear a red ribbon, button, sticker, or bracelet throughout the week in recognition for their commitment to a healthy lifestyle free of substance abuse for residents of all ages in our Nantucket community.
Great. Thank you so much.
The special town meeting for November 9th will start and hopefully end on Monday, November 9th at 6 p.m. at the high school. There is a special voter registration. The deadline to register to vote in this special town meeting is Friday, October 30th at 8 p.m. at the town clerk's office. And the 2016 annual town meeting warrant is currently open for citizen warrant article submittals through November 23rd at 4 p.m. That's it.
All right. Public comment. You know, we have a couple people here. Steve, could you just identify yourself for the record?
Steve McCluskey. Excuse me. I have really basically one question. I'd like to preface it with a very short statement. I'm well aware of the pressure and the challenges that the administration and the boards, various boards have in our town in prioritizing capital projects. There's a lot of moving parts. I sat in this room as part of the Finance Committee for a few years and certainly appreciate those challenges. Last year I expressed my opinion in a letter to the Inquirer-Mirror about the sad state of the cobblestone streets in town. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that short letter about putting a glass of water in your cup holder and driving down Middle Pearl Street into the lower Indy Street, and probably by the time you got to Water Street, your cup would be empty. The state of these cobblestone streets in town is, I think, is an embarrassment to our town. We are a world-class destination for visitors from all over the world, and not just lower India Street, but upper Main Street and various parts throughout town. I know it's a daunting task. The last time it was done, I think, Libby, maybe 25, 30 years ago or something. I can't remember exactly when it was. Maybe Bobby remembers, or some of the other local people, but it was a daunting task. My question to you, though, is individually or collectively, what's your assessment of these roads in town?
I can tell you, Steve, that Libby and I and Kara have had numerous discussions about this, and it's on our radar to start taking care of these roads this year. So,
okay, if you were to prioritize certain things, there used to be a certain level, 1, 2, and 3 level.
I'd say it's pretty high on our priority. It'd be right up there with a 1, probably. To get, we know, we.
There's nothing in the there's nothing in the capital budget this year for it.
No,
is that correct?
It's in the road repair budget. It's in the
Correct.
DPW budget. Yeah, there's money in the DPW budget to repair the cobblestone streets.
Currently,
yes.
but not necessarily going to be voted on
No.
for that 144 million capital projects.
Could this is not on the agenda, so I don't know how far the board wants to
Right.
go.
Yeah,
with it,
no,
but
just a brief comment, but you're beginning to answer the question, so I don't want to belabor
We
it.
have a proposed item right now that's been in the capital budget for a couple of years now for $900,000 for the maintenance of island-wide roads. Some of that will be spent on cobblestone streets,
Within the next 12 months?
once approved by town meeting.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. Okay. Any other public comment, Ms. Butch, and then Mr. Barada after that.
Butch Ramus. I just wanted to bring up the thing, scallop and starting already, and I haven't been down to Jetties, but I have a funny feeling that's where all the scallop shells are being dumped. For years, I go down there and turn that water on and off on the Jetties building. It's the disgusting smell around that place. I just trying to figure out why they have to dump them there all the time. It's got to be a better way, because all that juice and stuff goes into the soil, into the sand, and there's no drainage. Now it's a big lake down there most of the winter. The water can't go anywhere because of all the scallop juices have gone into the beach sand all around there. And I just feel that that's not the right spot. That's one of the main spots. People go down to watch the boats come in, walk around. Pretty disgusting. So, just a thought. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Butch. Mr. Barada, excuse me. I always get it wrong, Tom. I'm sorry.
Thomas Barada, Westmont Comet today. I'm just wanted to talk to you in regard to house moves. There was a recent house move that went from Westmont Comet all the way over to Surfside or Fairgrounds yesterday, and I understand that we like to recycle houses on the island. We like to, repurpose stuff, but unfortunately, the company that did it has left literally a hydraulic oil trail all the way from Westmont Comet all the way to Fairgrounds. And it's not the first time that it has happened. And I wanted to know if the moving companies for these houses that move houses, do they have to have a bond with the town for any destruction or any damage that's caused, number one? Number two, cutting down trees and stuff, do they have to notify or remove or go back and fix whatever it is that they messed up? And number three, is there a way that we can have adequate inspection of their equipment to make sure that they're not dripping the oil everywhere? Because they're being guided by the police department who's actually watching it, and the oil is all over the road of Somerset, all the way down Surfside and down Fairgrounds. And it's just going to wash into the watershed.
I don't know, again, this is not on the agenda, and I don't know how far you want to go with it. The answer to the first two questions is yes. The answer to, I'm not quite sure what the third question is about inspection of equipment. We don't
But
really.
is there, like, they have to have a bond in order to move in order to move a house? They have to have an insurance bond. Do
Right.
we have any type of bond for environmental damage? I mean, you can't pick the oil up off the street, and once it rains, it's gonna be, into the water table. And we're trying to protect the island as much as possible, but when you have gallons and gallons of hydraulic fluid dripping all the way down the road, all we're doing is just spreading it.
Chairman DaCosta?
Yep.
I will say that I was made aware of the situation yesterday, or last evening, and I do know that the fire department acted fairly quickly using certain material to put on that, and then the DPW went back with the sweeper because I know it was windy last night, so the town itself tried to remediate that, and we have a meeting scheduled already on Monday with all the various departments, the utilities, and the mover to address various issues that happened yesterday.
Okay, and just for the record, when they moved the house across the street from Sconset Market last year, you could follow the trail all the way down Sconset Road to the left turn down Bunker Road when they moved that building. So it's not the first time that this has happened, but this is the most extravagant of liquid trail that I have seen in a long time. And for us being on, sandy environment, 1 ounce of that goes many feet into the soil. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention and see if we can have it addressed, because it is house moving season. So hopefully we don't have to deal with this again, and hopefully it rains a lot so it dissipates it.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? We have no new business for tonight, so we'll move on to the approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. The approval of the payroll warrants for the weeks ending October 11th and October 18th, 2015. Seeing no objections, those will be approved. The approval of the treasury warrants for October 14 and October 21st. With no objections, those will be approved. Approval of pending contracts for October 21st is set forth in the spreadsheet identified as Exhibit 1. Libby?
We have a service agreement for the Visitor Services Department with Print Synergy Solutions. This is for the printing of the annual travel and lodging brochures. It's an amount that's split with the Nantucket Lodging Association, so our share of it is $7,890, and that funding is available in the Visitor Services budget. We have an amendment to a service agreement with Cape Air, Nantucket Air, and this is a rebate, so to speak. Heidi can explain it a little bit further. The contract wasn't met entirely with the original conditions, with scheduling and some other things. So we are actually getting commuter books back. Do you want to give a little quick update?
Sure. Per the terms of the bid, they were required to have a certain schedule, which they are unable to maintain. So we sent them a termination letter to terminate the contract because they couldn't meet our needs. And we figured out how many seats we are using as town employees per year, came up with a dollar figure, and agreed that in lieu of a cash payment, they would give us coupon books for that amount. Because we now have to pay more money to travel on Island Air for the convenience.
Rick?
Just to follow up, is this based a problem of the number of flights per day or a specific flight? I'm just a little curious to know what happened.
Yes, as part of the bid, we required, say, the flight started at 6:30 in the morning and the last flight's at 7 p.m. We discovered last fiscal year that they had dropped off the 7 p.m. flight. So they put that back on. They found that they weren't unable to maintain their flight schedule according to the bid that they had done. They only have maybe 10 flights a day when they said that they would have 15 flights a day. So they cannot meet their contractual obligations.
And if we move to the other airline, their flight schedule meets our needs.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
So did they give us commuter books to the other airline?
No, they are funding. Actually, they're going up above and beyond what we asked. The difference in price for us is about $24,000. That's what they're giving us commuter books. They're also funding a corporate coupon book account with Island Air for us to travel on. Plus, they are still honoring their contract rate through June 30th. So we are basically getting all this through June 30th, and then we have to start over again.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Heidi. We have a service agreement for various town departments with Cape Cod Express. It's a not-to-exceed contract. It's shipping for all products and services that we receive, and the funding comes out of the various departmental budgets that would get things shipped to them from Cape Cod Express. And lastly, we have a grant award and assurance for the airport with Mass Department of Transportation. The award is $40,200 for vehicle tools and equipment and the purchase of a snow blower. I don't know.
Any questions on any of the contracts? If not, those will be approved. Consent items. We have several consent items. A request for approval of the application of new officers, directors for the annual all-alcoholic beverage license, club license for Great Harbor Yacht Club. DBA is Great Harbor Yacht Club, located at 96 Washington Street. We have a request for an application for new officers, director of an all-annual alcohol beverage club license for Nantucket Golf Club, DBA Nantucket Golf Club, located at 250 Milestone Road. And we have a resignation acceptance from the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Historic District Commission. If there's no objections, those will all be approved. Okay. We're going to do the Gray Lady hearing now. This is a hearing regarding sanctions against the Gray Lady Group LLC, DBA Gray Lady, resulting in liquor license violations pursuant to the Town of Nantucket Rules and Regulations governing alcoholic beverages, Section 15, sanctions for violations and regulations. All right. Anyone who plans on speaking on this, please stand up. I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear that the testimony I present during this hearing is truthful under the pains and penalties of perjury. You all swear that? I do. Gentlemen, okay, you can sit down.
And I'm going to abstain.
Matt's going to abstain because he sells bread too. All right, and if somebody could tell me in our packet where we are.
Thanks for asking, Bobby.
We have 300, almost, yeah, we have almost 250 pages in our packet tonight, so between this and the HDC appeal, we had lots of paperwork to go through. 158. All right. Chief, you want to start us off?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. To get started, I want to hand over a handful of exhibits that we have related to this hearing. What we have is Exhibit 1 is a copy of the notice of the hearing served via certified mail. Exhibit 2 is a copy of the notice of the hearing served in hand with return of service attached. Exhibit 3 is a copy of their liquor license. Exhibit 4 is a planning board file number 0606, which is related to the restrictions on their license. Exhibit 5 is police report number 15018-655. Exhibit 6 is police report number 15018-741. Exhibit 7 are copies of the server training certificates of the individuals involved in the employed by the Gray Lady. Mr. Chairman, following the completion of investigation, the Nantucket Police Department believes that enough cause exists to refer Gray Lady Group LLC, the licensee, which holds an all-alcoholic beverage license issued pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12, to the Board of Selectmen for violation of the following Town of Nantucket rules and regulations and/or Massachusetts general laws. We believe there were, I forgot to mention, there were 2 days with different violations, so we'll do the first day first and then the second day. The first day violations were 2 counts for violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 69, sale or delivery of alcoholic beverage to an intoxicated person, and 2 counts for violation of Town of Nantucket Rules and Regulations, Chapter 250, Section 2, Paragraph 8, operating in violation of restrictions imposed by another town, board, or commission. The facts, as we know them, are the Town of Nantucket Rules and Regulations, Chapter 250, Section 2, Paragraph 7 provides the Nantucket Police Department shall have the authority to investigate potential violations of the regulations and to conduct other such enforcement as the chief of police deems appropriate, including the use of plainclothes police officers for purposes of ensuring compliance with Chapter 138 and regulations and other state and local laws. On Saturday, September 6, 2015, at approximately 1200 a.m., which is 12 midnight, Sergeant Rocket, Officer Haggerty, and Officer Schwenk, all three who are present tonight, conducted an investigation of the business operation of Gray Lady Group, LLC, doing business as Gray Lady. Two plainclothes officers entered Gray Lady at 2 Chins Way. While inside, officers spotted two males who, based on their training and experience, appeared to be under the influence of alcoholic beverages when they were observed being served alcoholic beverages and then consuming same on the premises. A white male, hereafter referred to as male number 1, was wearing a bright orange shirt and jeans that were rolled up at the ankles. Male number 1 fell into Officer Haggerty while attempting to pass by him. The officer noticed a strong odor of alcoholic beverage coming from the facial area of male number 1. The officer then followed male number 1 into the indoor bar from the patio area. He observed male number 1 to be unsteady on his feet, had red glassy eyes, and had slurred speech when he spoke. The officer observed male number 1 order a Red Bull and vodka drink. The bartender, which served male number 1, was a white male with black hair and black trim beard. This bartender then served male number 1 a second Red Bull and vodka a short time later. Male number 1 was observed consuming both of these drinks after the officer, based on his experience and training, had determined that male number 1 was under the influence of alcoholic beverages. Officers then went to the outside bar, where they observed a tall white male wearing a light blue button-down collared shirt, hereinafter referred to as male number 2. The shirt was unbuttoned with a white T-shirt and with a colorful printed picture underneath it. Male number 2 was leaning with his back against the door frame. The officer then observed male number 2 stand up and lean closer to another individual to talk. As he leaned forward, he lost his balance and reached out with his right hand and caught himself in the door frame. This door frame is approximately 4 feet away from the bar. It was apparent that male number 2 was using the door frame for balance. At this point, the officer observed male number 2's head fall, and it appeared as if he was falling asleep. When male number 2 spoke, his speech was thick and slurred. Male number 2 was observed to step over to the bar, lean onto the bar for balance, and ordered a Stella Artois bottled beer. The bartender that served him was a taller white male with dirty blonde hair and facial hair, wearing a blue short-sleeved shirt with a pattern design on it. Male number 2 drank the beer, then went inside, where he was observed being served another Stella Artois beer by the same bartender that had been earlier identified as the bartender who served male number 1 earlier inside the establishment. Male number 2 was observed by Officer Haggerty to have consumed both drinks after the officer, based on his experience and training, had determined that the male number 2 was under the influence of alcoholic beverages. Chris O'Neill and Morgan Sigg were identified as the employees who served the alcoholic beverages to the intoxicated individuals. The liquor license for Gray Lady contained the following restrictions. Condition number 4, no food or alcohol shall be served on the patio after 10 p.m. And condition number 5, no amplified music shall take place in the patio after 10 p.m. Officer Haggerty observed male number 2 being served an alcoholic beverage at the outside bar located on the deck after 12 a.m. This is a violation of condition number 4 in the license. Officer Haggerty reported that when he first entered the establishment at approximately 12 a.m., he observed the outside deck to be very crowded with loud music coming from it. The music on the deck was separate and not related to the interior music, which was a disc jockey. This is a violation of condition number 5 on the license. Sergeant Rocket, a uniformed police officer, identified and spoke with both male number 1 and male number 2, identified by the undercover officers as being intoxicated. Based on his training and experience, he verified that both of the individuals appeared to be under the influence of an alcoholic beverage. Sergeant Rocket ensured both individuals had safe transportation home. After the conclusion of the operation that evening, Sergeant Rocket spoke with the manager of record, Ryan Chadwick, and informed him of the violations. The 5-year history for the premise is it's a new license with no prior violations. There are aggravating factors present. Morgan Sigg, one of the bartenders, had an expired alcoholic beverage server training certificate, which had expired in June of 2014. and there were multiple violations on this one occasion. The Blue Book guidelines, Chapter 250, Section G, would ordinarily call for a first violation to be a written warning. The NPD recommendation, because of the aggravating factors, that that the board consider a 1 to 2 day suspension to be served on September 3rd and or 4th, 2016, which is a Saturday and or Sunday. If you want to act on that first violation, then we can do the next day if you want. We can do it that way, or how do you want to do it, Mr. Chairman?
Do you want to? Should we take them all cumulative?
Yeah, I mean, I think, do I recall seeing a cumulative recommendation for 4 days?
My recommendation, depending on what you do, the first violation would make a difference on what we recommend for the second day.
So that sort of suggests we take them one at a time then, if there's an impact of one on the other.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is for the violation serving an intoxicated individual, or two of them.
Yeah, they served 2 intoxicated individuals, and they were concurrently to that, they were in violation of their license by serving alcohol on the patio after 10 o'clock and also having music on the patio after 10 o'clock, which are both specific prohibitions on their license.
And what was the time of the serving again?
Around midnight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the recommendation here is for 2 days.
2 days.
You know, my reaction for fellow board members is that's a minimum. I mean, I think this is a fairly serious set of circumstances, and if the recommendation is for 2 days, I would support the recommendation.
Do we want to hear from the plaintiffs first?
Yeah, we should hear from them, but I'm just saying.
Gentlemen.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
Cal McLaughlin. I'm Ryan Chadwick, Gray Lady Group.
Can you raise the mic up, Ryan, so the people at home can hear?
Again, we were going to get legal counsel for this. We're not sure what the procedure is. This is our first time doing business in Nantucket, so we're not sure if this is still an option for us to, or if this is.
Well, you can get counsel, but we're going to make a finding based on whether you have counsel here or not.
It doesn't
So,
matter.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
It sounds to me, well,
a lot of this stuff is subjective as far as the officers saw people with red eyes, they're staggering. I don't know if anyone's actually given a sobriety test or not, if they actually blew into a machine saying that they were overserved. So, again.
Well, I'm going to get to the crust of it for me.
Right.
Midnight, still serving booze on the patio, still playing music.
Sure.
We had a long talk about this when you came in for the entertainment license, and you assured me you were going to be closed at 10. And I can tell you right now, when you come back for your entertainment license and your liquor license renewal in January, we're going to have a long talk about what you get.
Right.
So just be prepared.
Sure. Well, as far as the amplified music, if that means DJs outside or just
No
playing
music
any-
at all outside after 10 o'clock. That means you shut everything off outside and you go inside. It also means you don't serve beer outside or any alcohol outside after 10 o'clock. So, I don't know what part you didn't get when we talked about this. We had a pretty long discussion about noise outside and serving outside, and we didn't want it to turn into a rowdy scene.
Right.
This is 2 hours after your deadline, not 20 minutes, not 15 minutes, 2 hours, and people are getting served outside and you've got music playing, separate from what's going on inside. I mean, it pretty much says to me, you just said, screw it. So anyway, we'll talk about that when it comes time to renew your license in January. But
Right.
anyway, as far as the intoxicated people,
I think we have professionals who are pretty good at observing people who are under the influence, and I respect that.
Tobias?
I would second, some of your thoughts, Bobby, and Rick's. I had some hesitation about this license to begin with, and I think it's important that
John? Yep.
I'll defer to our expert counsel.
So, Mr. Chairman, just so that we follow the proper procedure here, I think you should hear all of the evidence first. And then...
For both cases, John.
For both cases.
Okay.
And then you close the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay? And then you can go on to deliberate after that. But
Okay.
the board should wait. I don't know whether these gentlemen have additional information they want to provide to the board, but you should certainly hear them out. And they have a right to question the officers if they so choose.
Okay.
So they should be made aware of their right to do that. And when that is completed, and there is no, and then I think you should give the police an opportunity to rebut any evidence that they present. And then let's close the hearing, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so on the first offense, do you have any questions for the officers that were here? If you do, Chief,
I'm
can you
Ian Perry.
get...
I'm actually one of the operational directors for a Gray Lady. Can you hear me? Sorry about that.
Your name, could you just...
Ian Perry. I'm actually not a partner. I'm one of the operational managers. On those particular 2 evenings, we did contact the police department. Not that this is a mitigating circumstance, but we did try to hire detailed officers, not in the sense to replace... Understood, sir. I can understand. Not to replace, obviously, a bouncer or to provide somebody from a security. We just wanted the visual representation of the police at our cost and to help with crowd control for the parking lot, just because we do know that as people exit into the parking lot, to help direct people to cab stands and to make sure that the parking is in orderly fashion, more of in a crowd control capacity, not in an effort to... We've had detailed officers work with us before over 4th of July, and we actually asked the officers never to try to handle IDs. Obviously, we would incorporate them if we thought there was an incident or misrepresentation of fake IDs. We were approved initially for 2 detailed officers over these actually 2 dates, but later that request was taken back, saying that the police did not want us to have officers on site replacing what we should have as security. We tried to explain that we wanted it more for crowd control, but we totally understood and went with their best wishes. Also, in regards to the police reports, we did not so much a full-fledged independent investigation, but Male 1, as it was referred to, John Sullivan, I believe, actually contacted us in the next couple days and said, why did they take my license and make a copy of it? Do you have a receipt? I only had 2 drinks at the bar. I wasn't intoxicated. And he said that independently he wanted to reach out to the officers and make clear that he didn't want his name in the report and represented that he was intoxicated because he resented the allegation. I don't know, to be honest. We didn't know the preparation necessary for this particular meeting because originally we did not know it was going to be so formal so that we thought we might need legal counsel to prepare our defense. So to be honest, some of this is just us winging it, so to speak. But to say that we could try to provide you with written testimony from him and his, obviously, take it for what you will, he did not feel that he was intoxicated this evening, that he was mentioned as male number 2. Male number 1. Male number 2, we unfortunately had no personal contact with and were not able to reach. I'm sure the chief will get to the second allegation, but I might as well address it while we're here. We did reach out to Isabel Adams, the young lady, in the next instance to see what exactly happened because we were unclear exactly what had happened. She was not indicted, or she was not written up for being intoxicated, but she did help the other individual off premise, and she said that the police checked, made sure he was okay, and then let him leave on his own record. They didn't feel the need to PC him. If they were so visibly intoxicated, why weren't normally they would either be PC'd or even the ambulance called if they were so grossly intoxicated, as opposed to letting leave on their own reconnaissance. So some of these questions we do have to kind of ask the detectives and say why they felt that if they were so intoxicated they were allowed to leave and walk home onto their own devices, as opposed to not everyone left in a cab, as opposed for the second one. And as I said, Mr. Sullivan, the male number 2 in the first one, let's address it as they stand, was left with the reconnaissance of another young female, from our understanding. So we do understand, but also one other point that I think is important here is how many other institutions were investigated on these particular evenings on Labor Day weekend. If you send officers into a bar on Labor Day weekend on midnight and you ask them to look for drunk people, I will say that I don't think it's going to be impossible to find somebody that you think has been drinking. I think almost every establishment that's serving alcohol after midnight on Labor Day weekend, Saturday and Sunday night, which is a holiday, you'll be hard-pressed not to find somebody that has had a few libations. How we deal with the situation and how we try to control the situation and the security measures that we put in place are certainly within your rights to question and see if we're doing the right things, but I don't think we were trying to be egregious in that. I don't think we were, as you said, Mr. DaCosta, I don't think we were saying, hey, be damned. As the second point, as far as the amplification of the music and the service outside, I don't know if we need legal counsel in order to make my comments continue, but as you said, if we get to that stage, we will. The amplification of music, I think, was a misinterpretation of our point. There is exterior speakers that do exist. I'm not saying that that is right or wrong. We've never had a noise complaint in the area, ever. Obviously, that would be brought up in the police report if we actually were amplifying the noise to the point we're disturbing the neighbors. We just believe that that meant like we were not allowed to entertain outside. And as for the service of alcohol, if the police said we served after a certain hour, then we did. And for that, we'll just have to go with your best judgment. But I will say there was also a follow-up report in this. I don't know if the chief will get to it, saying that after the situation was identified to us, they did a follow-up check 2 weeks later, and of course, this situation did not exist. We tried to handle the situation as soon as it had been identified. Dawn? Thank you for your time.
I've just heard them say 3 or 4 times that they wish they had counsel, and I'm just wondering if we should be continuing this so that they can feel properly represented.
John?
Mr. Chairman, so the notice that was given to the respondents did indicate that they had a right to have counsel present and to represent them, and for whatever reason they chose not to. So that's something that's within the discretion of the board. If you wanted to continue the hearing, you could do so, but you're not legally required to. And I would also point out that embedded in the gentleman's statement, I think, were several questions properly directed to the police chief, who should be given an opportunity to answer those questions on the record.
Okay. Chief, you want to answer those questions?
Yeah, I'd like to address the notice issue first. Again, they had, subsequent to this receiving notice, also contacted Amy Baxter, our business license inspector, inquiring if they should have an attorney present to represent them. And we advise anybody that feels they should have an attorney or might need one to get one. But they also had an attorney, John Brazilian, contact Lieutenant Adams and talk to the department about this case. So our assumption was they had an attorney representing them, or at least there's been an attorney who has been calling our department asking about the facts in this case. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, actually, they laid out a lot of different things there. I would actually like to ask Sergeant Rocket, who oversaw the investigation that night, to come forward. He can explain his contact with each of the individuals they mentioned, the disposition of them, how they were, how he ensured that they had a safe way home, and then, if need be, he can describe, or the officer can describe in detail how how the officers made the determination that the individuals were under the influence. Now, one thing I can say is he's absolutely correct. A couple weeks later, we did another repeat investigation, and we didn't find a violation there a couple weeks later. But he was incorrect when he assumes that we only targeted their establishment. We targeted several establishments during that weekend, hence the reason we never got to them till about midnight. But I can't remember the exact number. Sergeant Rocket would know of how many establishments they actually checked that night. Sergeant Rocket?
Mr. Chairman, the board, Sergeant Rocket with the Police Department, John Rocket. The compliance checks were conducted, and I just want to make note to you that they were conducted along the almost exact guidelines as the ABCC conducts theirs. So this was not just crafted up through our department, but following statewide guidelines. The violations in question, Mr. Perry, who was not present on either of the nights, brings up some of the involved individuals. The first involved individual that they bring up, Mr. Sullivan, he's a local resident here year-round. I had a conversation with him outside. He was compliant and everything and providing his identification, have a conversation with me. He had informed me that he was intoxicated, that he had been drinking highly, and then had come to the Gray Lady and only had 2 drinks while at the Gray Lady. He was put in contact with a friend and sent in a cab safely. The second female that is referenced, Miss Adams, she was only identified as a party to a responsible party who took custody of her boyfriend, who was one of the males that had been identified as one of the intoxicated parties. Upon the checks being completed, I spoke on both nights to one of the owners, Mr. Chadwick, who's present tonight, and on the second night I spoke with Mr. Watson, who's also, at that time, was a manager at the establishment. They were informed that through the board and conversations with Chief Pittman that the community had identified the problem of individuals being overserved at multiple different establishments, and that it was a concern to the island based on different instances, whether it be at the establishments or away from the establishments that had taken place, whether it be personal injury or property destruction or different things out in the community. He was also informed that multiple establishments had been checked on all rounds of checks that were conducted. Multiple establishments were checked, and those establishments were identified, again, as establishments that had been identified with prior incidents of having over-intoxicated patrons or having other incidents away from the establishments where they were over-intoxicated. Alcohol was a factor, and through a conversation, further investigation, it was revealed that they had been drinking at those establishments.
Questions? Do you have any questions for the officer? No?
No, sir.
Okay.
To a point of clarity, they're absolutely right. I was not present during said evenings. The only to what I speak of is only the follow-up after I returned back after Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
I was just speaking of to people in the reports. We do apologize. We were under the assumption this might be a little bit more of an informal investigation as opposed to a sentencing. So we were kind of not as prepared. These people kind of contacted us and said, do you know why this happened, so et cetera, because I do believe their identification was taken and copied for the police record, just as a point of clarity.
Just for the record, at no time do we take copies of individuals' identification. We have a conversation with them. They agree to give identification or have a conversation to provide contact information if we have any follow-up. In this case, where they're identified as intoxicated, to make sure they're safe, to know who they are, who we spoke with, they were all compliant with such. We don't copy it. We just take a basic notes down so we have the information to provide to you, to the chief, and the department record of their names and proper identification.
John?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the police officers involved to address the question that I heard from the respondents as to why a breathalyzer test was not given. I think that's an important piece of information for the board to hear.
As Chief Pittman had stated, all of the individuals that were identified as being served while intoxicated, I spoke with through my training experience and the officers that were involved training experience, which obviously elaborates of extensive police academy where we're trained on identifying signs of intoxication. As you know, I'm well aware that we deal with intoxicated patrons very commonly. The reason we did not provide them with a chemical test or breath sample to determine their breath alcohol concentration is that they were not being placed into protective custody, so they were not being taken to our station where we have our breath test, and we did not have a portable breath test that we were using for the compliance checks.
John? So if I could ask the police officer to just reiterate for the board what he observed in terms of the behavior of these individuals that led him to the conclusion that they were intoxicated.
Mr. Chairman, I will ask the individual officer who actually observed him, Officer Haggerty, to describe the first day violation, and then the other officer to describe the allegation you haven't heard yet.
Good evening, Officer Haggerty. The first night we were there, you want me to go straight into the observations of the people or just the music? Okay. I observed the first male. I positioned myself so I could see the bar as well as the patrons at the bar, the bartenders, what they were serving. The first individual with the orange shirt, as he was walking by, he stumbled into me, and that's how I got my attention. I literally stuck out my arms to support him because I didn't even know if he was going to fall. He continued on into the bar, into the inside bar, where I noticed he was unsteady on his feet, where he then went to that bar and ordered his alcohol beverages. As for the second male, he was leaning against the door frame. It was clear that he was using it to keep his balance. It became more clear while he leaned in to speak with one of his friends, when he had reached back and grabbed it to continue his balance. When he went up to the bar to order his drink, he then was leaning on the bar with his forearms, which appeared that he was using that for balance as well. As noted, he was also, whilst leaning against the door frame, at one point his head came down to a rest. It appeared his eyes were closed, and that he was and as it was noted, this door frame is at max 4 feet away from the bar, clearly in the bartender's sight.
Do you have any questions for the officer?
No, so I completely trust these gentlemen's opinion on the matter. I'm not trying to, interrogate the gentlemen. I believe them to do a fantastic job. It was more of the general, at midnight on a Labor Day weekend, is it possible to find an intoxicated guest in our bar? There is a potential there, and I understand how we respond to it is what's within question. It's more of the severity of the punishment of getting the recommendation. I'm just not sure if I understand what the guidelines in the past have been, as Sergeant Rocket has alluded that this has been a situation at times before, and what the punishment was delivered then. Only reason being is closing us down for potentially next Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, if I may, has obvious major financial, repercussions. So, that's the only reason I ask of the severity. If the Blue Book is recommending a written warning, I do just question exactly the severity of said punishment. But as I said, I don't question the officer's judgment. I think, obviously, the Nantucket Police Department does a fine job. It was just more of, we didn't understand that if the guest, we did question the severity of the intoxication, given that we were contacted by one in particular, male one, saying that he didn't think he was intoxicated. But obviously, if he told the sergeant something different, I would take the sergeant at his word. No question.
Okay. Chief, can we hear the second one?
Yeah. The second one occurred on Saturday.
Chief, if I could just interrupt.
Yep.
Bobby, I think it might be helpful just to make a decision on the first one.
John suggested we hear both of them and do them together.
Okay.
So that's why we're hearing the second one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chief.
No problem. The second one it started on September 6th, which is Saturday, but it was essentially September 7th because they entered the establishment just right before midnight that night. But that particular night, Sergeant Rocket was in charge of the detail. Officer Watkins was an observing officer, and Officer Schwenk was his partner. The two officers entered Gray Lady at Two Chins Way, and inside they identified one male who, based on their experience and training, appeared to be under the influence of alcoholic beverages when he was observed being served alcoholic beverages and then consuming same on the premises. While on the patio of the establishment, Officer Schwenk and Officer Watkins observed a white male, hereafter referred to as Male 3, to be extremely unsteady on his feet, Male 3 had brown hairstyle and a comb-over fashion. Male 3 was wearing a dark blue button-down, long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, and gray athletic sneakers. Officer's first observation of Male 3 was his inability to maintain his balance. Due to the fact that Male 3 was so unsteady on his feet, he leaned his back against a wooden beam in order to keep himself from falling over. Upon closer observation, Male 3 displayed glassy red, bloodshot eyes, and his face was flush red with color. His movements were slow and methodical. Male 3 attempted to clap along with the beat of the song, but only managed 2 slow, offbeat claps before slowly spinning around to a friend. After a few minutes, Male 3 and an unknown male party approached the bar. The unknown male was wearing a gray button-down, long-sleeve shirt and blue jeans. The unknown male ordered alcoholic beverages for a group of people, including male number 3. Male number 3 was leaning his stomach against the bar in order to hold himself up. As male number 3 and the unknown male were standing at the bar, the bartender handed 2 drinks to male number 3. The bartender handed male number 3 a mixed drink and a shot of clear alcohol. Male number 3 was leaning his stomach against the bar to hold himself up at the time. Terrence Ruggiero, I can't pronounce it for sure, was identified as the employee who served the alcoholic beverage to the intoxicated individual. Again, the license has 2 conditions. No food or alcohol will be served on the patio after 10 p.m., and no amplified music shall take place in the patio after 10 p.m. Officer Watkins observed male number 3 being served an alcoholic beverage at the outside bar located on the deck after 12 a.m. Officer Watkins reported that when he first entered the establishment at approximately 11:55 p.m., he proceeded to the outside deck where he observed a disc jockey, complete with full equipment, playing very loud music on the deck. On September 6, 2015, the previous evening, Sergeant Rocket had personally notified the manager of record, Ryan Chadwick, of the violations they observed following that night's operations. Sergeant Rocket, a uniformed officer, identified and spoke with male number 3, who had been identified by the undercover officers being intoxicated. Based on his training experience, he verified the individual appeared to be under the influence of alcoholic beverage. Sergeant Rocket ensured the individual had safe transportation home. Another thing of note here is upon entering the establishment, the officers observed the doorman to be consuming what appeared to be an alcoholic beverage and also appeared unsteady on his feet. They reported that he had a drink in his possession the entire time they were in the establishment. After the conclusion of the operation that evening, Sergeant Rocket spoke with the owner-manager of record, Ryan Chadwick, and informed him of the violations for sale and delivery of alcoholic beverage to an intoxicated individual. For this, there are some aggravating factors. The bartender in this case did not have a valid alcohol beverage server training certificate at the time of the violation. He later obtained a certificate on September 20th, 2015. There were, again, multiple violations in the one occasion, and we're saying they failed to properly train their staff, and they continued the violations following the warnings about the similar behavior less than 24 hours prior. We're recommending a 4-day suspension with 2 days to be served after September 4th and 5th, 2016, which is Labor Day weekend, Sunday and Monday, or on dates consecutive to any prior suspension ordered by the board, with an additional 2 days to be held in abeyance for a year for a period until September 5th, 2017. It appeared to be just a free-for-all at that establishment that night. And one of the things that brought our attention to them was the fact that we've been dealing with reports of intoxicated persons falling into people's yards, walking down the streets all summer long. And when we encounter these individuals, the officers, one of the questions they ask is, where have you been drinking? And their establishment has been the one that's been pointed to in that area. And that's why we were there that night. It wasn't just because we randomly picked them.
Chief, just because I think it's pertinent, could you clarify what other establishments you've checked, or just because I think it is important?
Sergeant Rock.
The other establishments that had been checked in these rounds of compliance checked included the Lobster Trap, the Straight Wharf Restaurant, the Rose and the Crown, Town, Ventuno. There may be a few more, but there was a good group, multiple locations on each rounds of the compliance checks that were identified.
That's sufficient, Mr. Rocket. I just wanted to be clear on that point.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, do you have any questions for the officers or any comments?
First off, just in regards to the doormen drinking, they drink a ridiculous amount of Red Bull on every evening. That is true. That being said, they never have been given, to our knowledge, never been given any alcohol whatsoever. They are allotted about 3 cans apiece, and they do drink them out of clear plastic cups, similar to what we use inside, just to cut down on trash. To that point, unfortunately, the gentleman, Joey's out of country. Unfortunately, he can't speak on his own behalf. So we'll have to get some sort of written testimony to you for him, but he does not drink at work. He does drink a ton of Red Bull, several cans in a clear plastic cup that may have the appearance of a Red Bull vodka, potentially. But in regards to the rest, I think most of the points have been gone over. The only thing we would say in regards to the other people, I don't want to keep asking Sergeant Rocket to get up. I don't know how many of the other establishments had been brought up as far as in a similar context as to this. But we are in a mid-island area, obviously, where a lot of people choose to finish out their evenings. So we don't mean to inherit a lot of the problems, and we are trying to put our best foot forward in good police practicing. I mean, we've met with Detective Sergeant Klinger before, asking him guidance on how to deal with it. We've done everything we can for the underage epidemic that we faced. I hope that we've given in as many IDs as anyone else on the island. I think we probably lead the league in that. But we really do want to have a good relationship with the police, and as so far as to asking them to help us out on details so that we don't take up a disproportionate amount of time resources of the police department.
If I could just interject on that, I forgot to answer that point before. We don't do details at licensed establishments. There are occasions, generally Memorial Day weekend, sometimes on the 4th of July, we may do a traffic detail in or about that area, but as a general rule, we do not allow police officers to work at licensed establishments on details. I don't recall any phone call from them asking for any detail. I know I didn't get one. If one of my staff did, as soon as they would have brought it to my attention, I would have told them no. It's their responsibility to police their establishment. It's our responsibility to enforce the liquor code. There's rarely ever a place that can come in and say that they got a police detail to help them with their crowds and stuff. We simply don't do that.
He's absolutely right. I mean, on the 4th of July, we did have a police detail for two evenings, and I think it was expressed to us on the second attempt for the Labor Day. They actually did issue a receipt for us. We did pay, and then I do believe they did were contacted by the chief in saying that police are not a replacement for security or door staff, which we totally agreed to and tried to explain that we wanted them more in a crowd control capacity because of the parking lot situation. But we totally understood. I think the general point is that we're not trying to hide from the police or shake our hand in defiance. In essence, we're literally just trying to find our way. We know that this building has a previous stigma attached to it, and we're trying to do all we can to get out. I mean, we're a restaurant, first and foremost. Am I going to lie to you and tell you that we turned a blind eye to the opportunity of the late-night business? Of course not. When, it's hard enough trying to develop ourselves as a new restaurant in that new area, but when people start showing up on the late night, we're just trying to evolve with the punches as best we can and try to make sure that we capitalize on all opportunities to become a successful business. I'm not going to lie in that regard. We do hold ourselves as a restaurant first and foremost, but are aware that we were unaware, of how popular the late night drinking side of the establishment would be, and we're trying to work within those confines to just find the happy medium.
Dawn? It appears that you received a warning from the night before about serving and having the patio open after 10?
There was no warning about the patio being open. It was a warning about intoxicated individuals.
So it was not brought up that you were not supposed to be serving and having the patio open after 10?
They were doing a report. They said that was going to be brought up in a report as far as what we were doing.
But from Saturday night, and then you continued to keep it open on Sunday night after midnight.
The music for us, it's always been, again, we considered amplified music, amplified speakers as far as they're playing throughout, not like DJs. Do you You know what I mean? It's not. So
What
for
about
me,
the service of alcohol?
the service of alcohol? We can't. Yes, that's it's
So-
a violation. We agree to that.
Gentlemen, it says right here in your special permit, which I'm sure you read,
Right.
item 5, that no amplified music shall take place on the patio after 10 a.m. Amplified
PM.
music.
PM.
That means nothing through a speaker after 10 a.m. At
PM.
all. That doesn't, I don't know what, it can't be much clearer than that.
To your point, I mean, it's hard to disagree with the definition as you just stated. Previously, when we thought of ambient as opposed to amplified, meaning in the sense of, I understand, I mean, obviously, if
I
you
got
put
to
it
tell
that way,
you,
there's no.
this is
there's
a
nothing we can
perfect
say.
example. And I'll give you credit for something. You admitted something that no other restaurant owner in this town will admit, that you're trying to be a bar from 10 o'clock when you start serving food till 1 o'clock in the morning. At least you stood up to the plate and said that. I don't have a problem with that either. You're trying to make a living. Rents are expensive. The season's short. But what I do have a problem with is when you have stipulations like this that are clearly put on your license and you turn a blind eye to them. And then you come in here and you say, well, we don't know the definition between amplified music and booze. To me, for me personally, and I don't know how the rest of the board's going to feel here, this is the crux of it. I mean, serving intoxicated people, that's an issue. Believe me, it's an issue. But it gets down to how intoxicated was he when he stood in front of the bartender. But that being said, when you got people serving alcohol on the patio at midnight, when you clearly know it's 10 a.m. and you did it anyway, on a busy weekend, and you know what? I know exactly when these things always happen. It's Memorial Day weekend, it's 4th of July, and it's Labor Day, because you all want to get as much money out of the island as you can those 3 weekends, because there's a lot of people here. Well, I'm sorry. You know what? I run a charter business. I'd like to take 20 people on a trip instead of 6, but my license says I can only carry 6. That's what I carry. When your restaurant's to capacity, it's the capacity. When 10 o'clock comes, you close the patio. And I would be willing to bet that if I went into that restaurant that night when these officers went in and did a head count, you were probably well over your occupancy. And if there's 200 people jammed to a restaurant that's supposed to hold 100 or 100, I'm not saying you were. I'm just saying an example. When there's 10 people deep at the bar, it's really hard for the bartender to see if somebody's intoxicated or not, because he's got people 4 deep. He's trying to get alcohol or drinks out to them and get them, keep the crowd moving. That's up to your management and your doorman to do that. I mean, your bartenders can only do so much from behind the bar. So, I don't know where we go with this. I mean, you can sit here and say you don't want any, it's your first year and you think you should get a warning. Well, if it was one item, I could see you getting a warning, but this is not one item. And this is 2 nights in a row. The night before you were told you can't have music and alcohol on the patio, and then less than 24 hours later, it's the same thing? Yep.
So I think maybe it would be best if the board first close the public hearing unless there are any further questions that board members have.
All right. Is there anyone else that we swore in?
You don't, it's
We
not
don't need to-
appropriate to ask members
Okay.
of the public. If the respondents have questions, or
Do you have any other questions for anyone of the officers or the chief?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'm
okay,
going to
and
close the
to the
public.
board, nobody else does? Okay. So you should accept a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now the next motion would be, if I may, and I don't know who's going to make this motion, but it would be to make a finding that on September 6th, the license holder had 2 counts of violating Mass General Laws, Chapter 138, Section 69, serving to an intoxicated person, and 2 counts of violation of the Nantucket Rules and Regulations as specified in the police report, having amplified music after 10 o'clock and serving alcohol on the outdoor patio. So why don't we take that one first?
Is that for the 6th or the 5th?
Is that an acceptable motion?
Well, there's 2 nights, so.
We're going to do the second one after you make a finding on the
Okay,
first
but you
one.
said the 6th. I think it was the 5th was the first one, right?
Did I have that wrong? It's
Was
the
it
6th.
the 6th? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. The second one was on the 7th.
The 7th, okay.
So you should make a finding of that first violation first.
So someone needs to make that motion.
Yes.
Well,
I
if
would
you choose to.
I would make a motion that we find that the establishment Gray Lady on September 6th was in violation of 2 counts of Mass General Law, serving people
Intoxicated persons.
Serving intoxicated persons, and I'm going to refer to Town Council for the number of Mass General Law.
It's MGL Chapter 138, Section 69.
That chapter, and then the second portion of my motion, thank you, Council, would be that the establishment violated 2 counts of the town's Blue Book in playing music on the premises.
And serving
alcohol.
Serving alcohol on the
Okay.
premises.
Yes.
Thank you.
After 10 o'clock.
After
Is there a
10
second
o'clock.
to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Next one, John?
So then the next one would be, I move to find that the Gray Lady on September 7th violated, I believe it's 1 count of MGL 138, Section 69, serving an intoxicated person, and 2 counts of violation of the Blue Book, again, serving alcohol on the patio after 10 o'clock and having amplified music after 10 o'clock. So that would be the motion. This one is 1 count of serving an intoxicated person, but 2 counts of violating the Blue Book.
So I'll make a motion that the board find that the establishment Gray Lady was in violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 63 for the sale or delivery of alcoholic beverages to an intoxicated person, 1 count, and furthermore find that the Town of Nantucket rules and regulations were violated on 2 accounts, Chapter 250, Section 2, operating in violations of restrictions imposed by other towns, board, and commissions, those being serving on the patio after 10 o'clock and the playing of amplified music after 10 o'clock.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
So now that you have found the 2 violations, it's now time for the board to determine what discipline would be appropriate. I don't know whether you want to hear from the police chief for him to repeat his recommendation or whether you understand that, but obviously it's up to the board to make the decision as to what would be appropriate.
I'd make a motion
Go ahead.
that their license be suspended September 3rd and 4th of 2016, and that 2 days be held in abeyance until
So it's a total
September
of
of
a 4-day
2017.
suspension, 2 of which would be served on September
3rd and 4th of 2016, and 2 will be held in abeyance if there are no further violations
For a
prior
period of
to
1 year?
September 2017.
Right.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's it. All right, gentlemen. Try to do a better job, please.
We will. Thanks.
All right. Citizen departmental requests, I believe this was tabled or withdrawn? It's gone. It's off. Okay. So that moves on to public hearings. The first public hearing is a public hearing to consider a joint petition from Verizon and National Grid, Nantucket Electric Company, for the plan VZNE Inc. number MA2015-60 to relocate pole 31-1 approximately 165 feet easterly from Westmore Farm Road to Westchester Street. Is someone here for Verizon? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Tom Stanton. I represent Verizon. I'm a contractor. This proposal is to move that pole 6 feet toward the road. The request was put in from Eversource so we could have access to the pole. As it stands now, there's a lot of brush in front of that pole, and either Verizon or Eversource can access the pole.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to make comment on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Comments or questions from the board?
Just one. I'm curious if in the new location of the pole, if it's going to have any interference with any future paths along Westchester. And that's my question.
Mr. Chairman, I don't exactly know the answer to that. However, planning responded back with no concerns, so I assume if there was something like that.
So they're still
would be
far
concern.
enough off the road, not
Yeah.
to impede the road.
Apparently.
Just another question, if I may, Mr. Bobby. Why doesn't somebody cut the brush back? I mean, that's an option?
It's on
not
private
the-
property. It looks like it's on private property, sir, where the pole is now.
We could still
I don't
ask
know, the taking is usually around 10 feet for the utility.
But I'm just curious, you could ask them.
I think this was an old pole that was there before the road was improved, and
Yes.
now it's back and it's been brushed in.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to either approve or not approve.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
But, sorry, could you please make that with conditions that if,
Oh, yeah, with
I
the,
know this is-
conditions of
yeah.
with the conditions as set forth by the various departments. Is that a friendly,
Yes.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye, okay. The next one, public hearing to consider a joint petition for Verizon National Grid, Nantucket Electric Company for Plan BENE Inc., Mass 2015-59, to relocate the pole 125-2, approximately 12 feet southerly on Delaney Road. This is part of the same
No, sir,
series of
that's
poles,
a-
or is this a different
That's
one?
a customer request. The customer's paying for us to move the pole in order for them to
Put a
their
driveway in.
in.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to make comment on this relocation? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Questions from the board? This one looks pretty straightforward. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Same conditions.
Same conditions.
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions laid out in our packet from staff.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, a public hearing to consider, I think that's it for you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Public hearing to consider the application for a new common vicular, thank you, license, Nantucket Culinary Center, LLC DBA, the Corner Table Cafe and Classroom. Joy, how are you?
And I'm going to abstain on
Yeah,
these two.
I understand. The next two, you probably want to stay
Next
out of.
three, I'm
Next three,
off
Matt,
of.
yeah. Next four, actually. This is the old Mooney Building, which is now going to be the Corner Table Cafe. I think this is pretty straightforward. It is a public hearing. Is there anyone here that wants to make comment? I don't see any, so we'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, we sort of went through this before in a general way. I assume these are following up on the necessary licenses to
Licensing, yep.
implement the program you outlined.
Yep. Entertain a motion.
Motion
Seems
to approve.
Second.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Stay there. I think we're here next. This is a public hearing to consider an application for a new entertainment license for Nantucket Culinary Center, DBA, the Corner Table Cafe. I understand this is just like TV and background music. Is that?
Yeah, I think we'd also like to have the possibility if we wanted to do, an acoustic, something in the cafe inside, that would be also permitted. But otherwise, it's through an in-house PA system. If we're doing lecture, seminar, that kind of thing, we also have it plan to wire it so that whoever would be speaking would be amplified through the in-house PA system. But we have no speakers outside and no intention of doing any of that. But again, we would like it to be a possibility that we could have a musician do something if we have a private event in the upstairs, or if we have a acoustic evening, poetry, readings, that kind of thing.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Any comments or questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public. Oh, sorry. Chief?
Mr. Chairman, just a matter of clarification. I thought I heard him say they weren't going to have music outdoors.
Correct.
Okay, but the application does say outdoors on the patio to have low background music through radio or iPod.
Must have been a clerical.
Something on
My
we have no
clerical.
intention of putting any music outside ever.
Okay.
So we need to amend this
I'll
to say.
amend my application.
So I'm looking at the application here, and here's, we need to work on this a little. Instrument music, type of usage, maybe acoustic. We can't have an application that says maybe. All right, so we either got to take the maybe out or take the whole thing out.
Well, since this is a new business, we don't really yet know how it's
I
going
understand,
to
but
evolve as far as.
So if it's not objectionable, just leave it in,
Yeah,
strike
but
the maybe.
I want to strike the maybe on that and strike the maybe on vocals as well, because if you say we
I'm
can't.
just giving you the, there's
No,
things
I
might
appreciate it. I appreciate it. I just,
Yeah.
we're going to take out the maybes, and we're going to make sure there's nothing on outside.
And I will do the edit on the outside.
Is there any objection to the possibility of outside music?
Let me just clarify for a second. I was using my notes that I got from Ann on what they were asking for, and now I was just looking at the application here, and we don't see it on that application. So she may have
misunderstood in one of our meetings or
misunderstood
something. I don't
yeah.
know if we necessarily want to say we'll never have alcohol outside, and so my idea that we would probably not have a guitar player outside
Well,
is
I
pretty
would,
likely.
I would probably object to anything other than low background music
Yeah.
outside.
And we don't even have speakers out there now, so.
So
why don't we just leave outside out for the
yeah,
time? If
and
you
let's
change your
take
mind, come back.
Erica. Let's take the maybes out of the application. Okay, so. So now that we've gotten the application squared away, is there any questions or comments from the board members, or does someone want to make a motion?
It seems pretty straightforward, and so hopefully it'll be a nice establishment. I'd make a motion to approve with the exception of the.
I did.
With the note that the maybes will be taken out, and we appreciate your effort to try to incorporate things.
And we're not going outside.
Nothing outside.
And we're not going outside. And if I could also add that, just for your clarification, that acoustic music or vocal music should be allowed inside, unamplified.
And that's why I took the maybe out. So how'd I do there, John? Pretty good, huh? I'm learning. Trying to make your life easier. How do you defend a maybe in court, John? Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Next, we have a public hearing to consider. Public hearing to consider a new common vic license for 45 Surfside LLC DBA 45 Surfside Bakery Cafe. Rebecca, hello. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Good.
Great.
All right. So this is a common vic license, which are pretty straightforward. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak on this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Is there any questions or comments from the board members?
Just to make sure, this is the new facility close to the Muse? What?
Diagonally across.
Diagonally across from the Muse. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. That's all about it. Just make sure I know
okay.
where it is. Yep.
Motion?
The one that used to be the health, used to be the club. It's not the one you're thinking about right now.
Used to be Nantucket Fitness. All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to
Second.
approve. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And now we have a public hearing to consider the application of a new entertainment license for the same premises, 45 Surfside Road, LLC, DBA 45 Surfside Bakery Cafe. And let's see, same type of thing, TV, background music, very low. This is a public hearing. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Comments, questions from the board?
Is there any outside
Yes.
music entertainment?
There'll be a deck in the front, and so, yes, there'll be low music. It's not the kind of establishment that's going to have any.
And it is
Top
only
40.
till, hours are only till 9 p.m., so.
So if they go out on the deck, they're done by 9.
Right.
Just to understand.
Yeah, it's not going to be like 1 in the morning. Any other questions or comments? I entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a
Second.
second? So all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public hearing to consider the application for a new seasonal, wait a minute, excuse me. Public hearing to consider the application for new seasonal all-alcoholic beverage licenses for Metropolitan Club, Inc., DBA Meadow, Maine. Carl? Oh, Mr. Swain. So let me get this straight. We don't want us year-round anymore. We're going to a seasonal.
That's correct.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public want to make a comment or question? I don't see any. Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Comments or questions from the board?
Maybe just a question. I'm not sure anybody knows. How many folks downtown are open year-round now? Are there 3 or 4 left? Or
Oh, there's more than that.
more?
Yeah, you've got Town, Nautilus, Queequegs, Nix, Rosencrown.
So there are lots of them.
Yeah, there's
Just want to be sure.
probably
Thank you.
Brotherhood.
6 or 7 at least, Rick. Lola. I would consider Lola downtown. So, any other questions for Mr. Swain? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go. See how easy that was?
Thank you.
All right. The Board of Selectmen, Board of Public Works, public hearing to consider the amendments to the commercial landfill users hauler fee. User fee schedule. So, Matt, come on back.
Mr. Chairman, generally, about annually, these fees are increased by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and it is meant to match with increases in the landfill operator's contract. So these are the proposals for the coming year, and the CPI is 2%, 2.5% estimated. And these bills would go out in the next month or so.
Okay, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to make a comment on this? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there anyone from the board that wishes to make a comment on this?
I don't think the fee increases in and of themselves are all that substantial. So,
All right. I'll entertain a motion then.
Just one other piece of commentary. I know we had talked about there had been some discussion earlier about food trucks and whether or not they apply to this, and whether or not the board placed a moratorium on food trucks due to this reason. I just wanted to make sure that this is being included in them,
just as a point of reminder.
I don't think the moratorium was because of these fees, but we are having we're calling it a business license discussion internally, and we will be coming forward with recommendations for the board on food trucks and other licenses like that.
Thank you. Just taking the moment to...
That might include fees that, if not...
Okay, we're getting a little off track here. I have a...
Just to be clear.
We'll get to it, but let's get back to adopting the fees. Motion to approve the fee schedule. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we will, that is going to come up on an agenda because we've talked about it numerous times.
Great.
So.
Thank you, Bobby.
One quick comment I'd like to make is that there are other things should go up cost of living as well.
Yeah,
I think
some of our fees should all be tied.
you can't, like even the sewer fees, you can't do this. You can't do the capacity fee because that's tied to the plant, but the other fees could be going up slightly
to the
every year. CPI, because otherwise they're way out of whack 5 years later, and so.
The HDC appeal, as I said earlier, is rescheduled. Yes. Can I have a motion to continue the HDC appeal until November 4?
So moved.
I'm recused from this.
Yeah. Well, we're just voting. You're just recusing from the vote. It was made by Matt, seconded by Tobias. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. So we're going to have, on that night, for the three of us, we're going to have 3 HDC appeals all on the same night.
And no town council, right?
No, oh,
I'm just kidding.
John
just
will be here. John will be spending the night for that one. We might be spending the night for that one. Okay, the next we have the town manager's report. Libby, I'll turn it back to you.
Energy Coordinator, Lauren Sinatra, is present to give her quarterly report, and you'll see she is quite busy and working on a lot of different and important initiatives on behalf of the town.
Thank you, Libby. Good evening to the board. Lauren Sinatra, Energy Coordinator, Town of Nantucket. Happy to present the first quarterly energy report for fiscal year 2016, and we'll jump right to it. Next slide. So electric usage increased 6% from this year versus last year. However, there were significantly more cooling degree days, about 49% more this year versus last. So as a result, it would be assumed that certain municipal buildings had higher loads attributable to increased air conditioning. There was a 39% increase at our Island Home, 75% increase at Saltmarsh Senior Center, 39% increase Airport Terminal. There was a 16% increase at Surfside Wastewater Treatment Plant attributable to increased dewatering processes due in part from the dry weather. 11% increase at Nantucket High School. There was a 14% reduction at Sconset Wastewater Treatment Plant, a 21% decrease at the lifeguard dorms, maybe in part from the hot water systems we recently installed. This building for Fairgrounds had a 5% decrease. There's also a 2% decrease at 16 Broad Street. And this past summer, we did implement energy saving measures with the window AC units, programmable thermostats, and maybe that was attributable. If the data was normalized for the weather, it could be said the town used electricity more efficiently this year versus last. So next slide, please. So in August, after the airport solar project was essentially terminated because of unfavorable economic terms, I reached out to the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, to see if they could support us in a research analysis to see whether PV and battery storage was viable on Nantucket and whether these technologies could cost effectively reduce the island's peak electric demand and help defer the need for a third cable. The request was approved and the report was finalized earlier this month. It was very helpful and of significance. The analysis confirmed that the town should pursue a third-party power purchase agreement for electricity rather than finance, own, and operate a system ourselves, which is what Honeywell had presented to the airport to do. It found that the price of electricity from a third-party provider in a PPA would be expected to be below the current and forecasted price of utility provided electricity for the town. It showed that if we could not develop a project before the end of next year in which the federal investment tax credit decreases from 30% to 10%, it would result in a 3-cent increase in the price of contracted electricity. Not to say that there wouldn't be savings either before or after that deadline. With smaller scale projects below 3 megawatts, that could net the town $1 million to $2 million in net present value in avoided utility costs. And large PV alone could not significantly impact Nantucket's peak load. However, when combined with battery storage, it could contribute to a peak reduction and help defer the need for a third cable. And this last conclusion has been very intriguing to both National Grid, who's now discussing the concept of battery storage at their generation site on Bunker Road, but also the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, who is managing a $10 million energy storage initiative and is currently looking for demonstration locations. So there could be some economic incentives for the island of Nantucket to explore this further. Next slide.
Can I ask a question just
Sure.
real quick? Lauren, when you're looking at doing your cost analysis and saying that this project is, potentially a project is going to save us money by deferring the installation of a third cable, and you assume a third cable costs, $50 million.
This analysis had nothing to do with the third cable cost.
Okay, but all right. I guess is what I'm getting at is if you assume a third cable costs $50 million, and you as a community we implemented $25 million worth of renewable projects, and they shaved off of our peak load, that would avoid us implementing a third cable. which would then save us $25 million.
I'm not sure we could assume figures at this point. From what I understand, we have about 7 years to work against that deadline
Right.
before
But
they'll truly understand.
I think you understand the point I'm trying to make, and I hope my board does, that there's a value in spending money beyond the rate of electricity if you're going to offset the implementation of a third cable, because that is a large expense. I just think it's an important distinction when we're looking at the numbers.
Next slide, Erica, please. So after the Honeywell deal with the airport fell through, we were left to try to pick up the pieces and see if any of the research and analysis could be salvaged into a different arrangement. So from going from a model in which the town would be responsible for financing, owning, maintaining the site, to engaging a private developer who would do all of that, and we would enter into a long-term leasing agreement and a contract for electricity. And, you know, not to say that there aren't real challenges and a lot of moving parts to this, but I remain optimistic. Our largest challenge is working against that December 31st tax credit deadline. But there's a lot going on here. SunEdison did visit the island on Friday. We toured a lot of municipal sites, and they remained very interested in the airport parcel and some land at the Surfside wastewater treatment plant. The idea with the airport land is that it could become a community shared solar model, in which case the town would get, or the developer could get, full SREC value, which is very important for their income stream. 50% of the power could be contracted long-term with the town or airport, and the other 50% generated would go to sale to the community, the residents, small businesses, at a guaranteed lower rate than the utility. It would be a floating rate, but always guaranteed to be less money than the basic standard rate. There's a model just like that being developed right now in Foxborough. I've been in touch with the town manager, the DPW director, their energy committee, and they're very excited to have the first community shared solar model of this type and model with SunEdison, and it's been very positive with their community so far. There's a 5-acre parcel at the wastewater treatment plant that potentially could offer an extra megawatt directly to the wastewater treatment plant, which is, of course, the town's largest electricity user.
So the wastewater treatment plant site is it different? Because there were issues before about, what were they, weight on the land between the settling ponds?
The very last slide, if you could fast forward.
Okay, all right, well, gotcha. So you can talk about that.
This is it. Yeah, the last one. It's outside of the present fence. David Gray and I toured the site with SunEdison, and from what I understand, this land, is deeded for wastewater treatment plant operations, and it, of course, would be subject to the same rare species mitigation issues that we're experiencing at the airport, but it is open land and could lend an extra megawatt. So
when they came, did you discuss the other possibility of using the
We did. We
land
showed them
between
that design, and they would not recommend that, just for many reasons. Yep. So the next step is really to clarify the mitigation issues, whether we have to pay out of pocket to the NHESP or find land elsewhere on the island. We will receive back SunEdison's proposals. Most likely their engineering team will come back to do more formal analyses and then prepare the appropriate ATM articles as we need to. But I'm happy to update the board as we receive new developments, but this is moving forward. Next slide, Erica. This is more or less an update to the community that in November, residential electric rates through National Grid are rising again. It will be a 29% increase from our current rates. However, it'll be 19% less than what we paid last year, which was 16% or 16 cents. Now we will be paying 13.29 cents a kilowatt hour. And a reminder that there are third-party suppliers. You don't have to stay with National Grid for your supply. And these seem to be the three best and most competitive plans available at this time through Con Edison, Constellation, and Veridian. And also, National Grid does offer a budget billing to allow for regular payments every month along the year. So you have a consistent and understandable expense every month.
Lauren, do you have any idea how many Nantucket residents have opted for alternative suppliers?
I do have that data, but I'm not prepared to answer that. As we pursue municipal aggregation, that is a figure we're going to have to know and pinpoint. And I believe I do have that somewhere.
Just
Yeah.
I'd be
I did it
curious.
this year and locked in at, I think, 9.5 or 9 cents,
Yeah.
so I knew it wasn't going to be where it was.
Right. Because this came up a year ago when you had some of the same information. I just was curious about how many
I know a couple
acted on
businesses
it.
that have done
Yeah. Good. Okay.
I would say it's still a minority, but I don't have that exact figure.
I know Brian did it with the ice house.
Next slide. Just a mass save update. We've surpassed our goal for the year, which was 400. We've now helped 449 residents and small businesses take advantage of a no-cost energy assessment. From the first of the year, that's resulted in over 20,000 LEDs, 162 Wi-Fi thermostats, 64 free dehumidifiers, 54 hydroelectric heat pump water heaters, and so on. So the program just keeps getting better, and if at any point a resident has had an audit but believes they're eligible for the new incentives, to still call the number and say, I'd like a special home visit to take advantage of the new incentives.
And we're still doing audits?
Yes, next slide, please. They return next November 2nd to 5th. Anyone who participates that week will get 20 red tickets for the holiday drawing. And then again, they will not be back until March of the next year, where they'll return every other month. But we're on a great track. An update on the wind turbine. Let's see. In quarter one, the turbine generated 26 megawatt hours, which was a decrease from the 33 megawatt hours in quarter one of last year, which is somewhat attributable to the turbine being out for a week in operation in July and September of this year. But since it's been in operation, it's brought in or avoided nearly over $236,000 for the school. And these are just some other projects in progress. I understand the town will be issuing the RFP for a community choice aggregation consultant this week or next. So a lot will be happening in that regard. I do know that 72 municipalities are now approved for aggregation programs, and the DPU process has been dramatically expedited to about a 3-month time from when the town submits an aggregation plan. With the last administration, it took between 8 and 12 months, so that's positive news.
Well, before we get too far, the wind turbine.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that slide minute for Erica? So the 236,680 that's what we've saved the school?
That's avoided electricity savings plus the $51,000 that we sell with the renewable energy credits on the open market.
And what does it cost us in maintenance and?
I don't have those figures. I can only report on
Can
the
we get
generation.
those figures? I'd love to know the savings versus the actual cost.
Sure.
Thanks.
If you're going to go there, then you have capital costs, or we could assume it.
Well, we didn't have capital costs because we didn't buy it. But
I know, but to
I just-
understand the
I know we had to
economics.
put a new generator or whatever, the turbine
Which
on the
costs
top.
real money.
Yeah, so I'd like to know overall costs. Let's have overall expenses, just out of curiosity. Thank
Question for the school, but I'm happy to reach back out to them. Last slide, please. Yep. On Monday, we have a group of WPI students coming who will be assisting us in some energy research. We really want to try to maximize public outreach and get a sense of what the public's attitudes and awareness about energy is right now and compare it to lessons learned in Worcester. They are hosting a smart grid pilot project, and just to see how residents there have embraced that technology and those kinds of programs and how that might translate to Nantucket if we were to do a demand response program.
Lauren, just back to the first one again for a second. I think you said 72 communities
Correct.
And that's, what are there, 360 communities or something, John? Is that it just sounds like a lot, much larger number than, but I don't remember what it was before.
A lot of these are very recent approvals. I would say maybe 24 in the last
So that's
couple
almost
months.
a quarter of the communities. And just saying that's a significant amount to me.
Yep. Because now it's, the best model is no risk to the town, and many are finding good success with it.
I have a question. What is the non-wires alternative?
It's essentially National Grid's pilot project to try to defer the cable through traditional and non-traditional energy efficiency measures. So all of the new incentives that they're offering us, the Wi-Fi thermostats, the free heat pump water heaters, possibly some ice energy AC units for next year. So that's all involved with the non-wire. How can we meet Nantucket's peak load demands without installing a third cable?
Right. And those are sort of hard or, machine-oriented things as opposed to turning the electricity off under some of the other options, which they're supposed to be looking into as well, right?
Yes.
How receptive we all might be
That's
to
part
that.
of our WPI project this year, which should
Which
assist
I think is
us.
a big issue.
Yep.
It's interesting that we're trying to stay away from third cable, but the 40 units in Satcham's Path are all electric houses.
That's interesting, as opposed to gas or whatever.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
But you know what's interesting, because I have the house I moved, I made all electric, and what happens, it actually, if you don't turn AC on in the summer, which we didn't this summer, it actually runs opposite. So my peak use was in the wintertime, because the heat pump heater was running more in the winter, and in the summertime with the windows open, the thing was,
Well, it's no doubt
was
the
$30 a month.
The
It was cheap.
ACs in the island is what killing us.
Yeah, it was the AC,
we didn't
but-
have ACs 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
and every new house
But this,
with 6 bedrooms is running AC.
And not just one AC, but 6 different zones through the house.
But but the key though is if you insulate the house well enough, then you don't really need the AC run. Either it doesn't run as much, or you don't really even need it. We didn't use it at all at the house this summer. So even though it was as hot as it was, we didn't need it because it was insulated so well. It would only get hot about 5 or 6 at night.
Yeah.
Because it kept the cold in. So if you do the building right, then it's going to run opposite. It sort of doesn't make sense when you think about it, but when you actually see it on paper, you get the graph from National Grid that tells you what your use was, and I was shocked. I'm like, wait a minute, our use was bigger in the winter and lower in the summer, which was interesting.
It's true. We are nervous about new development, but Satcham's Path, for example, is being built to the highest efficiency standards, super insulated, and what we've attributed a lot of the peak to is dehumidifiers running, actually multiple dehumidifiers running throughout the day in unconditioned spaces or with windows open, old electric water heaters, and of course AC units. But that is also why for just Nantucket they are giving away the free ultra-efficient hybrid heat pump water heaters and the free dehumidifiers. There's a great solar hot water feasibility study and program now funded by the Mass CEC. It essentially would cost us nothing to have a consultant look at our facilities and see if this makes sense for anywhere. I thought, our island home would be a natural choice, but with the plans for that building in the near term, we're now looking at the wastewater treatment plant. They use between 15 and 20,000 gallons a year. David Gray and I have a conference call tomorrow with one consultant, and we'll see where that goes. But there's great incentives for not only the study but also the construction.
How about the schools? They must use a fair amount of hot
This
water.
program is open to any nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Yep.
So it wouldn't apply to the schools.
It would.
It would.
Yep.
Because even
The showers, yeah.
well, the showers, the kitchen, be
Right.
worth looking at. They got a lot of big flat roofs up there. You could stick those panels up there. Probably wouldn't be able to see them,
Are
can
there
you?
some already up there?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
I think there's
And we
two
got a new
panels.
$45 million new building that's going to go in. It'd be nice to incorporate something into it.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Bobby. I was actually just talking to someone who did an installation up in Boston where they put an installation in that was, rated for, Boston hurricane winds, not quite Nantucket, but similar scenario on a flat roof. And there's, the system is netted together or like bolted together the whole system and then weighted down with cement blocks. And apparently it's rated for hurricanes because it's all one piece. And the advantage is there's no penetration of the roof. So
Anyway.
which has been a concern in the school. So I think it's something the board should definitely encourage Lauren to pursue, and I know she's always interested in.
Working again with the Builders Association and National Grid on hosting another Energy Code series for our local builders this winter, and looking to bring more energy education opportunities to our public schools and also the private schools with elementary school students. So that's about it. Open to any questions from the board.
No, I don't have
We
any.
sort of asked him as we went through it.
I'd love it if you could schedule the energy thing with the building association on a non-Wednesday night so I could come, because I wished I'd been there last year. Maybe I'll play hooky one night. You guys can run the meeting. I'll go.
One of our students, Ben Parker, was out at Tesla doing battery work. He was an intern out in, and they're doing a lot of pretty amazing things out there.
Yeah.
That's the future.
It is the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, that takes care of the town manager's report. Selectmen's reports and comments, we've already done the Gray Lady. So we have to finalize board comments for the Richmond 40B applications for Meadows 2 apartment rentals in Sandpiper Place, single-family homeownership. Not sure where we start with this. Libby, you want to?
Well, you are, as you know, we're in the 30-day comment period, and there are draft letters in your packet. We've spent quite a lot of time, the Director of Planning and Town Council, and any comments that came in from the board, in compiling the letters. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look them over.
Well, they seemed, my general impression was they were fairly extensive. Most of them seemed to sort of pose almost like a question, please consider the impact of these issues. And I'm not sure what kind of response we expect. And maybe, Counselor, maybe you, some of them almost, I don't want to say routine, but I would guess could be asked of almost any 40B project in a way. So that I'm curious how much response we expect from the state, because if you take each one, there's a lot of information that might have to be forthcoming to try and deal with those issues, John.
I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot of detail that we think needs to be addressed. But I would emphasize that this comment letter, while it does go to the state, they're really designed to frame all of the issues and to assist the Zoning Board of Appeals.
The ZBA in dealing with the same question.
Exactly, and so this is a good opportunity for the town, for the selectmen, to really stake out a position in terms of what they want to see ultimately considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals when the hearing actually takes place. In both of these instances, I would just point out what I assume is the obvious to the board, and that is that we're saying that we're not asking that the project eligibility letters be denied. We're saying that these are appropriate locations as long as all of the concerns are addressed, and that's the focus of both letters, is to address those concerns. Some of it is routine in terms of what you would want to see in any 40B project, but there are also some very specific issues that both Andrew and Ilana had. They collaborated on drafting these letters in terms of some discrepancies in the application, the site control issue, the subdivision question. All of those are important issues, and while we would certainly hope that the funding agencies would require the Richmond Group to address those issues, they will still be very much issues for the Zoning Board of Appeals when the hearing actually gets underway.
So something such as site control, which might have a number of questions.
Yes, and
for example, we have an extensive comment letter from a.
That's right, and we would expect that the Richmond Group will address those issues that we've raised, not only to the town but also to the funding agency. That's the way the process works.
And John, would this be if the board had a question as to the site control? Would be an appropriate time to include that inquiry in the letter?
Well, certainly, site control is a very important issue, and this is the opportunity that the town has through the Board of Selectmen to make any comments. So I guess as a general matter, the answer would be yes.
Great, thank you. And in that regards, I have something to pass around and just update the board.
From the housing, because that would not be considered site control, correct, John?
Well, I'm not sure what Tobias is referring to.
This is something I mentioned to the board, previously in regards to Housing Nantucket had, through the Board of Selectmen, I have some documents here I'd like to hand out to the board in regards to this. If you can just take two and pass them along. Back on June 24th of 2014, the board lifted a affordability restriction on the triangular portion identified as lot 796, which we held a affordability restriction on, and the one of the reasons for the board lifting that restriction was with the intention of a swap for 4 lots from the Richmond Company. And to my knowledge, that agreement has not followed through at this point, and so I would request that the board ask the Mass Housing to include a request for that in its application, or in its final. And Town Council, could you help me with this? In our final in our letter, we'd request that per these documents that be addressed.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so I think Tobias had mentioned something to me earlier today during my office hours for citizens petitions, and I think it's important that that issue be addressed. I'm not sure it's ripe to be included in the comment letter, and perhaps what might be a more efficient approach would be to address that concern directly to the Richmond Group in the next prior to the deadline for issuing the comment letter, because if the Richmond Group is going to comply with that MOU and they make that representation, then I'm not sure that's something we need to include in the comment letter. But if they're not willing to do that, then that certainly would be something for the board to consider.
So what's the deadline on the comment letter, again, just to be clear?
I believe it's the 27th,
Yes.
next Tuesday.
So there aren't many days left, just to be clear.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I could add in, it was through Housing Nantucket, I had asked them to reach out to the Richmond Company and have some to work out this issue. It came to my knowledge in the spring, and it's a complicated issue, and I was hoping it would have been resolved in writing by this evening, and I felt I brought this up to the attention of the board because I feel we have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer to make sure we protect the property that we transferred to Housing Nantucket. And so I think it's important that the board take this into consideration. And I'd like to further add that we ask Town Council to look into this matter. There's a number of documents relating to this matter, and I'd like to request that the board ask Town Council to examine the documents in relation to this matter so that the board could have a full understanding of what happened in regards to moving forward. Does that seem reasonable?
It may. I brought this up. I met with Richmond about 2 weeks ago, and they showed everything. and I brought this up, and I was assured that this would be taken care of. So I think, hopefully, they've given their word to me. I don't know if they've given it to anyone else. I'm assuming it's going to be taken care of.
Could I ask what, when we...
There's someone here
Bobby,
who's
go ahead.
representing Richmond, so let's put her on the spot. Patty, is this going to be resolved, or are we going to have to make this an issue?
Mr. Chairman, while Patty's coming up, the deadline is the 28th, but
Okay.
obviously.
But thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry Ann's not here. We met with her today, and she was going to come and let you know what we spoke about. Actually, we met with her a few times.
Spoke with her.
Part of the issues was us just figuring out to replicate the understanding that we had before with respect to the site plan, and we laid out some parcels for her today. She's taking that back to her board. So this takes a little time, but we are fully intending to essentially meet the obligations. As you may know, we did a certain part of the land swap. So the housing that they have going up currently, those lots, were Richmond lots as part of the decision, part of the deal. But 4 more will be provided. And while essentially the deal's not signed today, they will depend on the zoning change. So we sort of need that first.
Then I have a quick question. Then why would it depend on the zoning change?
I'm not prepared totally tonight, Matt, to sort of go through that, but I do know that because of the size of the lots, we would need to get the delineation changed in terms of the zoning that currently exists. But I can bring that back. I don't doubt that we are, as a company, looking to make this whole, but whether or not this is part of what we do as the 40B is another question. I mean, the 40B understanding and the discussion, and this discussion, I think we're, as you know, we're going for a special town meeting as well to sort of institute some of these changes on November 9th. At that time, the town will have another chance, like they did in the spring, with a different density change, clearly, but with this kind of proposal, where this particular proposition was in place, to make that decision happen and make the whole program taken over. As far as the 40B is concerned, I'm not sure yet how that factors into this. Certainly for the town meeting proposal, it's very important in terms of, it's very easy to do as far as our combination is concerned. With the 40B and with the town proposal, frankly, we're already doing 25% affordable. When this conversation happened, we were doing Article 53 was something very different. Article 53 did not have an affordable component to it. We were hoping that this understanding with the Nantucket housing was going to be our affordable component. We were trying to make that work and stretch ourselves to essentially not go into the density that we're into now. Obviously, that didn't happen. Right now, we have our own 25% obligation in terms of affordability, which we're happy to meet, both under the 40B and within, hopefully what we proposed before town meeting. So it's a different conversation, a very different set of circumstances than what was going on last fall. And if you want to have this conversation, I think it's really appropriate to put it on the agenda, as I asked Ann about doing, so that we can bring in people and be ready to give you the details specific to this discussion. If you feel the town has a stake in the game, then that's what I would encourage us to do, and that would be really appropriate as far as the town and Richmond.
Let's do that. Let's put this on an agenda for sooner than later and get housing Nantucket and Richmond and us together. And
I just a general observation, and obviously we don't all have all the facts.
Right.
But aside from the facts, I just sort of expressing my sense is that the town, through the Board of Selectmen, agreed to take a certain action. And I looked at that action as part of a couple of other actions that were part and parcel, and I'm concerned that one may have actually been executed and the other not executed.
Right.
And to me, there's something awry in our checks and balances if we execute a part of a transaction which clearly called for another section of executions, and they haven't occurred yet. And so I'm clearly disappointed. I'm not Patty, I'm just really talking to the board right now, and how we have our own checks and balances on real estate transactions. Okay.
I
And
think
we
the
need to
bottom
go
line
through
for me
that,
is,
Bobby.
if the zoning articles pass at town meeting, great, and then it works out.
Well,
But
here,
I need to
and
know that if the zoning articles don't work and you continue with the 40B, somehow or another, Housing Nantucket gets 4 lots. That's what I want to make sure happens.
right, and we want to make sure that that's vented, because unlike I think is being suggested, there was a transaction that happened, and whether we're all happy with where the line in the sand was drawn, I think that's what we need to bring out and have a conversation about, because there were things that were not executed, but they weren't all on our side. And so there was an agreement.
So I'd like to say, I don't know the facts,
Right.
Patty. I'm not into that. But
Well, that's why I
from
think
my
it'd be
point of
good
view
if
as
we
a
all,
town-
we had it on an agenda meeting and all of us got together and we hammered this out.
Right. And what we asked Ann before, and I think she was definitely supportive, we've had a great relationship and conversations about this, so I think this is all going to be positive, and maybe a change of policy from the board would be the end result. I don't know. But the end of the day, we definitely want to make sure that whatever the understanding is from the town, we fulfill, but we're also a company, and we don't want to go beyond our own, what's not essentially good for us as either in the conversation. What's reality is that there was a land swap, there was a triangle that was given up from Housing Nantucket. There were 4 lots that were given up from Richmond Company. Whether that lands in a place that everybody feels is balanced, I don't know. Were the 8 lots what we needed and not the 4 lots? Let's have that conversation. Is 8 lots over the top? And part of what we were trying to do to be more affordable in our proposition for Article 53, maybe that's the case too. But I know that today, given what we're doing, even with the 25% affordable, of which we're committed to doing, we're committed to the 4 additional lots. And we've had the conversation with Ann. We presented to her and to Paul Wolf those lots in a plan, in a scheme that they were bringing back to their board. So as far as that's concerned, I think you can feel assured that we are definitely moving in that direction.
Those lots, the same lots that we blessed in, because it's not just their board.
Those lots never existed.
Yeah, but we had the triangle that we traded for the other piece that could be X. Are we talking about the same properties?
Yeah, the properties are slightly different. That's what took us a little while, Matt, because the lines right now, because of partly where the houses have been placed and partly of where our schemes are, we've made whole at least 3 of them, and one of the lots is a little bit farther, closer to Old South Road. So that's what she was going to bring back to her board and see if that was going to be acceptable. So that's where we are right now. It's part of the negotiation.
Just to follow up your comment.
Because my point is, we're the, it's not just their board, we're the ones that made the deal, and we're the ones that have to sign off on it again. So I think it's important that it's not just her board, it's us too.
We
may have to amend ours originals.
With all due respect, that's kind of an issue between you and Housing Nantucket. So ultimately, we're in this, sort of to propose what we propose. And if you would like somebody from the Board of Selectmen at that table, all the better.
Well, I would,
Can
Bobby, just,
Hold on. Go ahead.
all right, I just want to follow up on that so we're clear. I would think that, I understand Richmond's has a different perspective, but from our point of view, I think Mr. Fee's point is that the board or the town manager should communicate with Housing Nantucket that we have to approve the deal because we did X depending on Y. And they can't change Y, in my opinion, without our understanding the totality of the transaction. So we need to let them know that. Does that make sense? I just want to be clear.
And just, if I could, it's not as though Richmond has a different perspective. I mean, that's not the point.
Well,
so
whatever it is, Patty.
It really has to do with your relationship with Housing Nantucket with respect to what can and can't happen here. And I know what we've been brought forward with. We went to their board after the town meeting in April. They blessed the agreement being dissolved as it stood and did not come back to you. That was not our decision. So
I'm not looking to you on that.
I know, but I don't want to leave the impression.
I'm looking someplace for that.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Just so we're clear.
All right. Thank you.
Tobias?
And just one thing I want to clarify that was, I think, misstated, which is that this happened after an article for 53 was proposed. This action took place by the board in June 24th of 2014. That was a number of months before any articles were submitted for town meeting or discussed at town meeting, just for the record.
But this plan shows what they proposed at town meeting. All of these lots that show on this plan were not yet created. The land was theirs, but it wasn't in these sizes as what shows before us.
That's an issue for our town council to evaluate, but as I read this letter, and if the board will oblige me, just one paragraph. Earlier this year, Housing Nantucket and the Richmond Company Incorporated agreed to a land exchange agreement in which the Richmond Company will transfer plus or minus 0.5 acres of land to Housing Nantucket in exchange for 0.4 acres of Housing Nantucket land fronting Old South Road. This swap is important to Housing Nantucket because it will allow for the development of twice as many units of affordable housing as are possible under the current configuration. So what that clearly says to me is that the Board of Selectmen made a decision based upon a swap and exchange, and we will discuss this further, but I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah, and we said we'd swap A for B. We didn't say, I think we need to have a meeting with Housing Nantucket.
And I think further...
Well, let me finish. The Richmond Group has said they're going to give Y to Housing Nantucket. We just need to make sure that we're comfortable what Y is. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with the Richmond Group. The Richmond Group had got a piece of land from us in exchange for giving a piece of land to Housing Nantucket. Now Housing Nantucket is in negotiations with the Richmond Group as to what the pieces are. We just need to give it our blessing. So in Ann, just because Ann's board blesses it doesn't mean that it's kosher. So
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't here when this was done. Was the restriction already lifted and recorded against the deed?
I don't know.
I believe it happened after we made the trade. I think it happened after.
Well, I think that's just one of the facts we ought to get on the table so everybody knows.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I don't know if it ever went on record.
Okay.
But I know that the board executed the release of restriction and right of reverter at its meeting of October 15th, 2014.
But it may have never been recorded?
It went to planning or I can't remember who it went to, if it was planning or if it went back to Housing Nantucket for them to deal with. Because the board signed off on that.
Maybe it
Okay,
didn't.
well,
Who knows?
let's
Regardless, I think
find out what the status is.
What would be prudent is for the board to ask town council to ask Housing Nantucket and Richmond Development for all documents pertaining to the situation, and so that the board can make a fully informed decision as to what happened at our next meeting before we submit our final letter to Mass Housing, because I think it is an important element if the development was going to pass over a triangle of property that the board lifted an affordable housing restriction on that enables the development to happen. I think it's important for the board to understand how those metrics worked.
I don't know if I agree with you there, Tobias. I think the gist of the argument is here is we agreed to a swap of 0.5 acres for 0.4 acres, and it doesn't matter what goes over that 0.4. We just need to make sure that Housing Nantucket gets 0.5 acres from the Richmond Group. That's the bottom line here.
I think that is the bottom line, definitely.
So, I mean, a comment in a letter about a 40B really has nothing to do with that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they have a contractual obligation that they have to give that piece of land to Housing Nantucket. So,
I totally agree with that, Bobby. I just think it is important that in stating the town's claim moving forward with Mass Housing that we clarify our position.
I don't know how that's going to have anything to do with the 40B application. John, am I missing something here, or is putting a comment like that in there just going to kind of go over the heads of? I mean, what is it? Are they even going to look at that, or is it going to help us with Richmond Group? I don't know what it's going to do that's going to make a difference on this comment letter. I mean, I listened to that 40B workshop yesterday and was pretty clear about what we can comment and not comment on, and all the rest of it's kind of mumble jumble.
Yeah,
So
but the site
Well-
has to be clean.
Yeah, that's why I think we need to know if that restriction was lifted and recorded. If it was, then that's gone. It's over with, and it's been deeded over to them. If it was not, then that's a different story.
So I guess we
But you
need to
can
find
ask
out if it's been
counsel.
lifted and recorded.
Yes, obviously. In terms of whether we should put something in the comment letter and what the expectation is, I do think we need to be a little bit careful about that in terms of the expected result. And, are we going to, I hate to use this term, but blow something up that is maybe readily resolvable? We can certainly find out whether that, what is the status of when the restriction was released, if that was recorded. But I would encourage the board to press Housing Nantucket and Richmond Group to include the town in a resolution of the fulfillment of the original deal as the town understood it, and to do that quickly, not necessarily in connection with this 40B letter, but certainly before town meeting. I think that's a more critical date myself.
Before the special town meeting.
Yeah, special town meeting, right. So I would recommend that you put this on an agenda and have both parties in here and hash it out and achieve the result that you expected when the board voted to release that restriction. That's what I would recommend.
Just in terms of letter writing, as a
Yes.
perhaps academic exercise, I think the deadline was
September 27th.
The 27th.
October 27th.
28, I think, Libby.
October.
October. It's like next week.
Right.
In other words, are we going to be meeting before the deadline passes?
No.
No. So
No, we're meeting
we're
on Monday.
obviously, unless we have a special meeting, we're not going to have a board-sanctioned comment on this matter possible. But just, I assume we could write the ZBA directly anytime
Sure.
if an issue was important enough and we felt something had to happen.
Sure.
And that may be just as effective as going to Boston and back
Yeah.
to the ZBA anyways.
Right.
Might be more effective.
Yeah, I just want to be clear on what we're
Right.
not, so you understand what we can't accomplish without a special meeting of the Board
Right.
of Selectmen.
That's correct. And the bottom line here is that the Richmond Group is the applicant on this 40B, and, the board is not asking that the project eligibility letter be denied, but the board will have a substantial opportunity during the ZBA hearing to make its feelings known. And I would assume that the Richmond Group, as their representative indicated, is committed to working this out. But I think we should do it sooner than later, not necessarily within the very tight time frame for submission of this letter. But the chairman indicated putting it on an agenda and having both parties in for a discussion. I think would be an appropriate response at this point.
Whether you want to do it for next week or, because there aren't all that many Wednesdays before the town meeting.
I would say that, Libby, because we have 3 HCC appeals on the 4th, it'd be better if it was on next week. I won't be here, but Matt can. You guys can handle it
I
without
think
me.
probably a good idea. Just to-
We know your feelings.
Yeah.
Let's get it underway.
I just want to make sure the deal happens. I don't care where.
Right.
Yeah. Apples for apples.
I think that's in
It
everybody's
sounds
interest.
like they are
So thank you.
working it out.
I think, totally, Bobby. And if I could just clarify why I brought this up, I felt as though, the board had, as a board member, I had a fiduciary obligation to let the board know and the public, in an open context, become aware of the fact that we transferred a housing restriction.
I completely understand.
I just want to be clear on that.
And I also want to be clear, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my take from the 40B workshop yesterday, which, by the way, for me was very very helpful, was that we're going to send this letter to the housing board, whoever it's going to here, and it pretty much it's a soup to nuts type letter. These are all our concerns, based on what we can make comments on. But I see this really more of us working closely with the ZBA to make sure that we really dig into these concerns in more detail.
as the 180 days goes along.
Because they're the deciders.
Right. Things like egresses in and out of the subdivision,
and I think
know,
there's a
safety
general
issues
comment
and
in
lighting
here.
and sidewalks and those kind of things that we
And
we're all concerned about.
John, isn't there a general comment in here about site control already? So, when you encompass this as part of that, it's already in the letter.
And
The way, if I may, with a 40B, it's a long hearing process, but it's an opportunity not just for the board to make its views known to the ZBA, but to work with the developer, to negotiate things with the developer, because it's in everyone's best interest to try to get to a point where you have a project that meets your local needs, is acceptable to the board, and I'm sure, in my experience, or certainly observing how Ilana addresses these, and she's done many, many of them, you work it through during the hearing process. There's give, there's take, and you hopefully arrive at a point when a decision can be issued that everyone's comfortable with. That's the goal.
So, but to be clear on that, I think one of the reasons why I brought this up to the attention of the board is that this is an agreement that preceded the 40B application and preceded the town meeting vote last year, and so I think it's important that we get clarification on that. These units will not apply to the 25% affordable. This is outside of that, and I just think that's an important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Could I, Bobby, just follow up on your comment, which I appreciate. John, it sounds like, let's say the ingress and egress questions, for example, or another example might be the length of covenants. If the Board of Selectmen wanted to engage those issues, do we plan on speaking or having our representatives speak to the ZBA?
Yes.
Because I just want to make sure we understand how to go about making our views known and how important they may be to us.
Yes, absolutely. Active participation in the hearing process and through council making your views known. And Ilana is going to be the one to help you through that. I can tell you, identifying ingress and egress and how many access points there are going to be. We've been involved in a case that's gone on probably 8 years now on a 40B. And that's the very issue that is still in contention. And we are trying to work that out with the developer because those are very, very important. It's not just site control. It's access, and that affects traffic and public safety and everything else. So all those kinds of issues are going to be addressed during the 40B process.
I thought it was interesting what he said yesterday about additional traffic isn't an issue, but safety is.
Yeah.
So that's the key. It's like, just increased number of cars isn't reason for a denial of a 40B, but safety in and out of the subdivisions is.
Right. So those are all phrases used in the dialogue, but I think, Bobby, as a board, we're going to have to consider how we go about this. Are we going to have to meet and, finding these things usually bubble up near the end.
Well, I think as this process goes on, we'll probably end up putting this somewhat underneath our selectmen comments each week, and I'm sure the ZBA is going to go through these things step by step. So as they can go on the steps, say today the next meeting they're talking about egresses, then we make our comments, and either in writing to the chairman or through.
Right, so we're going to just have to
as
work
chair
that
to
out.
chair, I can meet with him and express our concerns, and and it'll probably be on our agenda every week.
Well, I think it will have to be.
My question on those is there any of them that should be more specific now and included in this letter? Like I think the time frame. I think they should be permanent. The 25% should count toward the subsidized housing inventory for sure, and they should be permanently affordable. Those are the two things I feel really strongly about. Another thing I feel strongly about is that that if the exits go into Evergreen or some of those places, that we find a way to make sure that it doesn't become a throughway, because it would be dangerous. There's a bunch of families there with young kids, and so I want to make sure that maybe it's trees and maybe it's sidewalks, and you make it more of an urban streetscape, so to slow the cars down, maybe on-street parking, to slow the cars down so it isn't a throughway. You know, if you make a road that's flat with grass on the side and no trees, people just naturally drive 3 times as fast as they do down Broad Street. So there's issues that I think, if those are important to us, should they be in now, or is that too specific?
I think it's a good question for John to help with guidance.
That's why those are just a few things I thought of.
So the project eligibility letter and the comments that we're talking about tonight are an important part of the process. But when you really, the kinds of things you were talking about, Matt, that's really getting into the reeds. That's appropriate before the ZBA. And you know, Ilana and Andrew worked very hard on drafting these comment letters. I think they're quite comprehensive. They may not hit every single point, but you know, you don't really know at this point what every single issue is going to be. So my recommendation would be, unless there's something glaringly absent, which we don't think there is, let's approve these letters, and then when and if we get to the ZBA hearing, that's the time to really drill down on the details.
Dawn?
Oh, I'd make a motion that we sign and submit these letters.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve these letters. It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, that's fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't think that we should be, you know, with this particular location, this particular development, we should have something there. We should be working in good faith with the developers. They should be working in good faith with us to do something that's, you know, going to work for the island. That's going to be acceptable for the neighbors and work with the island. I think this is a good opportunity to do it the right way. And I think we should have a 40B or a 40R there, myself. So, all right. And I just lost a lot of my supporters, probably. But
you know, if you want to,
but that's I've been doing that my whole term. So
look, we can all start getting into that. I hope we're being a little. Anyway, if you're looking for other comments of similar vein, we can all do them.
No, I know.
Okay. Let's not go down that wormhole right now. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about this at town meeting. So, the next item is to finalize a charge for the Real Estate Assessment Committee. We're going to have a membership of 3 local residents with professional real estate related experience, i.e. real estate agent, real estate attorney, appraiser, surveyor, and 2 local residents. Other staff assistants will be Director of Planning. The terms will be June 30th, 2016. Board will evaluate the committee at that time and determine the term going forward.
Now,
Charge.
remember, this was just all draft.
I know. I'm just reading the draft. I don't know why. I mean, we've all read it. So are we comfortable with this? Is there anything we left out?
I think it's the kind of thing we can always modify and change the charge anytime. Right. So, you know, my interest is getting started, and I think it's a good start, no matter, you know. So,
so I would entertain a motion to approve it as drafted.
Just ask one question. Are you saying begin June 30th, or?
No, the term would end.
Would end June 30th,
initially.
And we would appoint them soon.
I think we want to appoint them. I think we've already advertised.
It's on the schedule for next week.
Okay, just.
So there are some apps in already?
Then we would reappoint June 30th.
The deadline is set for tomorrow. Obviously, if we get anything a couple days after that, I'd accept it. Sure. It's on your agenda for next week. It's a public hearing to review the applicants and to make your appointments if you so wish. You currently have 4 applicants.
Okay. Good. So the idea is to get started as soon as we can.
Good.
And the termination,
okay.
we can always extend it. We don't have to.
So I guess we don't need to really do anything other than just, this was an update as much as anything. Consensus. Yep. Okay. That moves on.
Can I get one little tiny clarification? And the group would be subject to open meeting law? Would you say? Yeah.
Yes.
Committee reports.
Unless they're discussing negotiations or
Well, they can go into executive
session for that.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Committee reports?
Well, just CPC finished reviewing all the applicants, and then on November 4th and 5th, we'll be deciding.
I'm curious.
Who?
What was the total amount of money requested?
I think it's around 3.7, but
3.7
requested.
requested?
On that. Yes.
That's it.
From
I
all-
think it was 3.7, 3.8, something like
Wow.
that altogether.
The last year I was on, it was like 8.4.
You know what? Don't
They
quote
know-
me
they
on
know
that
Don
because
is tough,
Libby's
they know
saying
Don's
it's
tough.
more
Yeah,
than that.
we had 8.4 requests and $2 million to give out. It was,
They
like,
know,
okay.
they know you're a pushover.
Right, you get him where you can.
Trust me. I think it was like $6 million in restoration alone. Anyway, anybody else
No,
have any?
Libby's telling me it's like 7 million.
Yeah, that
What
sounds.
were you saying? Is it going to be on the 4th and 5th, so I can just write it down?
Deliberation.
CPC.
Deliberation.
Deliberations.
Yeah.
And I just had a question for you, Don. I know, I was on the CPC last year, and we had a bit of a discussion about, for historic preservation purposes, making sure that folks, when they get a historic preservation funding, they have to put a historic preservation on their building, and that those funds for restoring the building should not be redistributed without a historic preservation consultant. I was just wondering if you had talked about that, or that was part of the process moving forward, that the applicants would pay for, historic preservation, is to make sure that the appropriate materials are being used on the buildings.
I'll make sure it's noted as we figure out who we're giving funding
Great.
to.
Because I do think it's important, because it is something that the taxpayer is putting money up, and we want to make sure these buildings are being preserved.
Yeah, definitely.
Correctly inside and outside.
And there's been a lot of discussion about ongoing maintenance on things and how that will be handled.
Great.
Any other committee reports? Rick?
By one, in my absence last week, I also missed a Board of Health meeting, and I know there were some important waiver requests related to the new septic guidelines for the Harbor District, and each one, I believe, was approved as long as they had an alternative system. I would like to have a chance, and I'll come back maybe next week and with a little more thorough explanation after I talk to the chair.
Yep.
Because these are going to be ongoing issues, and I think they're important that the board
Yep.
understand what's going on here.
Yep.
So I'll come back next.
Okay. Go ahead, Tobias.
And I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, with a couple folks of the Nature Conservancy, a member of the Land Bank, a member of the Conservation Foundation, and a member of the HDC, talking about different models in which the town would look to manage some of its different properties. The Nature Conservancy is a town-controlled but a private model that would enable. It started in Central Park in Manhattan, where the city of Manhattan controls controls the park, owns the park, but a conservancy runs the park. And we just kind of had a nice discussion about some different options of some better ways to potentially manage some of our public space, particularly our parks. And I think it was a very productive, positive meeting. Another scenario, possibility of a better way the town might manage its properties. It was a good discussion. I just wanted to let you know it's something I'm thinking about.
And what would be the next step if you were going to move that forward? How would you?
I think the next step would be, to get some information in front of the board as a whole and see if the board was interested in, kind of pursuing this model. Ideally it would be for a specific, one specific park. It does involve creating a new organization that privately funds the park with some funds coming from the town, but they're known to be a good model that can work to really improve the experience in parks.
Okay. I just looked up the figure for the CPC, just so you have it. It's $3,756,119.80
In request for.
in requests.
That's not bad.
And we don't know what we'll have yet, but it's probably going to be in the low 2 million range. So
Yeah,
there will
it's
still be a
usually
lot of
right around
difficult
2.
decisions.
If I could add in on that as well, I know there is a law, House bill, I'm missing it now, that would allocate some additional funds through how the deed excise tax is one of the funding mechanisms for the state's matching grants for the CPC, and that's an ongoing process at the State House. It's co-signed by 32, 34 different legislatures at the moment, and that should help provide some more stable funding for the CPC in ongoing years.
We had a ad hoc budget meeting last week. We're progressing along. First one of many more, I'm sure. So,
I have one more, Bobby. I'm terribly sorry. Thank you for obliging me. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund had a joint meeting with the Land Bank in which we discussed trying to find some new ways to allocate some funding with the Land Bank in regards to that. In the context of the State House isn't very interested in some new taxes, and so we're seeing if we could get some support from the Land Bank to allocate some of their funds to affordable housing through a home rule petition, but not in the sense that we'd be asking to change their charter, but in the sense that we'd be asking to create a affordable housing or a housing bank, and at the same time the Land Bank might be interested in relinquishing some of their funds to that housing bank. That concept was not received positively from any of the members of the Land Bank. They felt that they had a mission to continue to fulfill, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund understood that. But it was a good opportunity to have a conversation with the Land Bank. They're going to be undertaking a number of other tasks that give them a little more ability to work with housing entities to provide housing on when they're purchasing land. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund will be most likely pursuing the housing bank article again at town meeting. And that's something we're going to continue to work on, and we're currently pursuing a number of different options to provide a plan of how do we address affordable housing. So the group is quite active, and it's very positive.
all right, anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Is this all the signatures?
There's one thing there that's only Bobby. I think there's one thing that's only Bobby put up.
What is this one? I'm sorry.
These are the petitions for Verizon.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have the signature.
Yeah, we'll just sign them.